The last war on Earth didn't end with peace treaties. It ended with silence. Not the kind that settles over a battlefield when the shooting stops, but the deep, aching silence that follows extinction. Nations had torn themselves apart, chasing resources, ideologies, and illusions of unity. By the time the smoke cleared, there were only fragments left. The UN was a corpse, cities became ruins, and the satellites above Earth, most were just debris orbiting a dying planet. But that's when they came. Not with fanfare, not with invasion fleets. They came silently, drifting into Earth's orbit like vultures circling a carcass. Nobody knew who fired first. Maybe a rogue AI defense system mistook them for leftover enemies. Maybe they wanted to provoke us. Doesn't matter now. What matters is what they learned too late. Humans don't die quietly. The man who lit the match was named Cole Rayner. No medals, no rank, no family left to remember his face. Just a pair of scavenged boots, a plasma rifle he barely understood, and a deep hatred for being underestimated. Cole had survived everything. The wars, the famines, the betrayal of his own unit in Siberia. He'd seen commanders sell their soldiers for crypto. He'd watched children freeze to death while the elite partied in underground sanctuaries. And yet somehow, he was still breathing, still walking through the ash-choked air of Earth's last wilderness. That's where he found the crashed alien pod. At first, he thought it was another orbital junk heap, a leftover from the final days. But when the hatch hissed open and the smell of sterilized ozone hit him, he knew this was something not human. The thing inside was still alive, gasping in its own blue mist. Its skin was smooth like metal and soft like jelly. Its eyes? Pitch black and hollow. Weak, afraid. That was the first time Cole heard them speak, not with mouths, but directly into his mind. "You are not what we expected." He didn't answer. He raised the rifle and put a round straight through the alien's center mass. Later he'd laugh at how easily it bled. But the real terror came days after, when more arrived. Not soldiers, but observers. They weren't here to invade. They were here to study, to dissect, to understand why this planet, the one marked primitive and near collapse in their files, had managed to kill a genetically engineered scout in under 30 seconds. They underestimated Earth. More importantly, they underestimated the human instinct to win, no matter the odds. Cole became something more than a survivor after that. Word spread through the wastelands. Tribes of shattered soldiers, deserters, and scavengers began to follow him. Not because he was the strongest, but because he wasn't afraid to strike first. In their hidden data vaults, the alien observers had a term for it: dominant aggression anomaly. Humans weren't supposed to evolve past a certain point. Our emotions were considered a flaw. Our rage, our spite, our ability to fight even when logic said, "Give up." These were traits advanced civilizations had purged millennia ago. But that's the mistake they made. They forgot the one rule no empire should ever forget. You don't tame predators. One by one, the outposts fell. The alien tech they brought was sophisticated, but it lacked one thing: unpredictability. Humans didn't follow rules, they didn't obey patterns, and they didn't care what galactic laws they broke as long as they survived the next fight. Cole took their weapons, rewired their armor, captured one of their AI drones, and force-fed it Earth's war footage from the last 300 years. It broke halfway through the siege of Lagos. By then, Cole wasn't just a leader. He was a symbol. The aliens called him the Harbinger, not because he brought death, but because he brought evolution. What began as a quiet extermination mission turned into the galaxy's worst nightmare. Humanity wasn't just born to survive. It was built, engineered by pain, betrayal, and war to conquer. And the universe was about to find out just how deep that truth ran. They struck first, Not Cole, not his ragtag force of battle-scarred survivors, but the observers. Their arrogance finally snapped under the weight of fear. They dropped sterilization drones across the wastelands, programmed to burn out biological threats without warning. Cities still reeling from Earth's last war, barely clinging to life, went up in blue flames overnight. Children turned to ash in their sleep. Underground shelters collapsed under sonic charges. The message was clear: submit or disappear. But they didn't understand what submission looked like to a human. To them, it was obedience. To Cole and the thousands now rallying under him, submission was extinction with manners. They gave no reply. Instead, Cole rallied the broken. There wasn't a military base left untouched by time, rust, or sabotage, but there were weapons buried beneath the ice fields of Kamchatka, left over from the zero-hour conflicts. War tech so unstable even Earth's own generals had sworn never to use it. But Cole didn't care about oaths made by dead men. He led a convoy north, dragging old tank husks behind scavenged hovercraft, hacking abandoned satellites to mask their movements. And when he reached the silos, he opened them all. One of the older men, a former UN tactical officer with burn scars across half his face, asked him if this was smart. Cole's answer was simple: we can be smart after we win. The aliens didn't expect retaliation, not on that scale. When the first repurposed nuclear pulse railgun cut through one of their black glass command towers, they thought it was a fluke. When 2 more towers fell in quick succession, they realized something terrifying. The humans weren't just angry, they were organized. Across the globe, pockets of resistance lit up like wildfires. Old enemies joined forces. Russian snipers watched the backs of American gunners. African warlords donated their private militias to Cole's cause, not out of loyalty, but because they hated being ruled. Farmers turned their harvesters into armor-plated tanks. Hacker collectives in the ruins of Europe cracked into alien comms and fed misinformation straight into their systems. Cole didn't lead with speeches or hope. He led with fury. He told them the truth. We were never meant to be part of their perfect little galaxy. They came here to clean up the mess, but they forgot. We are the mess, and you can't fix something that bites back. And they bit hard. The next assault happened in what was left of New Asia, near the black glass crater where Sol used to be. A cleansing armada of 15 ships descended, each the size of a mountain, armed with disintegrator arrays and suppression beams. The plan was to flatten the region in under an hour. They lasted 16 minutes, because Cole was waiting. He'd found a weakness, something the alien tech couldn't handle. Pure chaos. Their weapons required target lock. Their systems needed predictive movement, but humans fought like fire, erratic, uncontrollable, and always spreading. He baited their targeting systems with hologram projections, then ambushed them from underground ruins. The final ship fell when a teenage girl named Ava, once a scavenger who'd lost her family to the drones, strapped herself into a crash rig and steered a stolen alien pod straight into the ship's main reactor. She never blinked. She just smiled and whispered, "For Earth." Cole never forgot her name. The galaxy began to listen, not to Cole's words, but to the transmissions of panic echoing through the alien observer networks. Other species, once dominant, began questioning the hierarchy. If primitives from a crumbling planet could stand against a cleansing fleet, what else had they been lied to about? Cole didn't care. He wasn't trying to start a rebellion across the stars. He was too focused on the next step. He needed to take one of them alive. A high observer. Not a drone. Not a scout. One of the minds who signed off on Earth's erasure. Because this wasn't just about war anymore. It was about the truth they were still hiding. Something about humanity they feared. Something they hadn't meant to reveal when they arrived. Something buried deeper than just biology or rage. Cole didn't know what it was yet, but he'd drag it out of them, one alien scream at a time. They found the Observer in the ruins of Nairobi, trapped beneath the wreckage of its own extraction pod. Its legs, if you could call them that, were twisted metal and flesh, its luminescent organs flickering like dying embers. It wasn't alone. 2 drones had tried to defend it. Cole's men gutted them like animals. It didn't beg. They didn't beg, ever. Too proud. Too engineered. But it watched him. Those glassy, depthless eyes locking onto Cole's face, studying every twitch of muscle, every hint of hesitation. As if it still couldn't comprehend what it was seeing, he knelt beside it, blood-slick rifle slung casually across his back. "You're not here to win," he said quietly. "You're here to stop something." The Observer didn't speak aloud. They never did, but Cole had been exposed to enough of their mental intrusions to hear the cold whisper in his head. "You were not supposed to last this long." He laughed once, harsh, dry. "That's the best you've got?" The creature tried to rise, but the pain short-circuited whatever psychic control it had. Blood pooled beneath it, blue, almost like antifreeze. Cole motioned to one of the resistance fighters nearby. A tall man with dark skin and even darker eyes. No name, no past, just call signs and scars. "Secure it! Don't kill it! Yet!" They dragged the Observer back to the underground outpost, one of the deeper bunkers built before the last corporate war. The place smelled of rust and fuel, lined with consoles that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. It was here Cole locked it in a containment chamber behind re-engineered alien tech, designed by Earth's last surviving physicists and pieced together from scavenged weapons. And then the interrogation began. Days passed. They tried pain, didn't work. They tried starvation, irrelevant. They tried psychological warfare, looping footage of burning alien outposts, the deaths of its soldiers, the fall of their black towers. It blinked once, maybe twice. Cole sat alone with it on the 4th night, watching the hollow glow in its eyes as it whispered inside his mind again. "You were meant to fade, not thrive, not expand." There it was. The crack. "Expand," Cole repeated slowly. "You're not scared of our wars. You're scared of what comes after." The Observer said nothing, but its silence screamed. It wasn't conquest they feared. It was adaptation. Humanity's ability to absorb everything. Tech, language, pain, ideology, and weaponize it in record time. They'd seen it in the last galactic uprising centuries ago. A different species had risen. Intelligent, fast learners. But they lacked the drive to consume and dominate like humans. Cole stood, leaning against the glass of the chamber. "You tried to wipe us out because you knew if we got out, if we ever reached the stars, we wouldn't stop." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Because we don't stop." The Observer's voice was quieter now, not afraid, but weary. "You were not a mistake. You were a test." The room fell silent. Cole felt something cold and foreign crawl down his spine. "A test?" he whispered. "We seeded your kind." It admitted. "Long ago. In 100 worlds, you were one of many, the only one that survived. Not just evolved, survived. Through ice ages, through plagues, through wars that made gods of madmen and ashes of empires. They had watched, silently, waiting to see if humans would die off like the others. But they didn't. They adapted, got crueler, smarter, hungrier. We weren't born of Earth," Cole murmured, barely breathing. "We were built." "Forged," the Observer replied. "By chaos. You passed the trial, but the trial was not supposed to succeed." And now the consequences were spiraling out of control. because the experiment wasn't just still alive. It was winning. Cole stared through the glass. You didn't come here to erase us. You came here to lock the door before we stepped outside. The observer's silence confirmed it. That night, Cole walked through the resistance bunkers with a new look in his eyes. Not just defiance, but destiny. Humanity had never belonged on Earth. Earth was the forge, the fire, the crucible. The stars were the battlefield. And the real war hadn't even started yet. They started with the moon, not because it held strategic value, but because it was symbolic. Every child who had ever stared up at the night sky knew that rock. It was the ceiling of Earth, the silent witness to every war, every prayer, every failure. And now, Cole was going to carve humanity's name into its surface in a language the galaxy couldn't ignore. The mission was suicide on paper. The alien armada still had orbital dominance. Earth's atmosphere was littered with their surveillance drones and countermeasure satellites. But Cole didn't care about the paper. He cared about the fear. You don't just beat gods, he told his people. You humiliate them. The fleet they were building wasn't pretty. No gleaming chrome, no elegant designs. It was ugly, brutal. A Frankenstein of reverse-engineered alien tech bolted onto Earth's last war machines. They dug old aerospace yards out of the dirt, used fusion cores pulled from melted cities. Even the AI interface running navigation was hacked together from a wrecked alien scout and an old Russian weather bot. The first ship they launched was christened Reckoner. Not by ceremony, but by blood. One of the engineers had died rerouting the plasma cores. Cole ordered her name etched onto the hull with a blowtorch. No speeches, just silence. Respect. And then they launched. The moment Reckoner left the atmosphere, the observers responded. 3 ships in low orbit moved in tight formation, sleek, black, silent death. No warnings, no demands, just annihilation. Except Reckoner didn't fall. She danced. Built to move like a human fighter, not a sterile drone, Reckoner twisted between beams of plasma, her hull screaming under pressure. She fired once. Then again. Cole watched from the underground control center as the feed flickered, then steadied. 2 alien ships disintegrated mid-air. The third retreated. Cole allowed himself the smallest smirk. Earth was no longer beneath them. Earth was now beside them. By the end of the month, they had 5 ships in orbit. Not a fleet yet, but enough to matter, enough to make the galaxy notice. And someone did. The first message arrived through alien quantum band frequencies. Scrambled, foreign, barely readable. A species called the Mayari, cold-blooded, calculating, distant cousins of the observers. They didn't offer help, they didn't offer peace, they offered terms. Cease expansion beyond your solar system. Dismantle the recovered technologies. Return to your containment orbit. Or be declared a rogue species. Cole read the message aloud to his war council. Then he spat on the floor. We were already declared that the day we learned how to bleed and keep walking. The Mayari didn't respond after that. Instead, they sent something far worse than words, a breaker-class siege vessel, 40 kilometers wide, designed to sterilize planets with gravitational weapons. It warped into orbit within days. No broadcasts, no demands, just silence. Cole had expected this. He had also prepared for it. That night, he walked into the Reckoner's command deck, wearing a suit stitched from dead alien armor, and looked his pilot in the eye, a woman named Kenna who used to be a smuggler before Earth fell. You ready to make the gods bleed? He asked. She grinned. They're not gods anymore. They're targets. The battle for the moon wasn't one-sided. It was worse. The breaker didn't fight with guns. It fought with gravity, pulling waves of lunar dust into plasma storms, warping orbital trajectories, bending time delays into glitches. Half the resistance fleet was knocked out before their guns even locked. But Reckoner stayed in the fight. Cole watched as she dove into the enemy's core, firing everything, jamming their systems with coded Earth music, raw electromagnetic garbage, even signals from old World War transmissions. Static became a weapon. Noise became fury. And then the breaker shuddered. Just for a moment. But enough. Reckoner rammed the central bay with a stolen antimatter core attached to its spine. The detonation was seen from Earth. Not a flash, but a second sun rising beside the moon. And when the fire cleared, the breaker was gone. So was Reckoner. And Cole. He stood in silence, fists clenched, eyes locked on the sky. Not mourning, just calculating. One moon, one ship, one message. Humanity would not be contained. The forge was cooling. The sword was almost ready, and the stars were next. The stars looked different now. Not distant, not poetic, not unreachable. They looked like targets. Cole stood atop the highest ridge outside what was once Buenos Aires, now a war-forged fortress called Outpost Vanguard. Above him, the sky was crowded, half with constellations, half with orbital wreckage still falling from the last battle. A streak of alien debris burned across the atmosphere like a funeral pyre. Reckoner was gone. But her death hadn't slowed them. If anything, she'd ignited something more dangerous than technology: belief. Men who once hoarded food now volunteered to die in drop missions. Former arms dealers gave up their last stockpiles for the resistance. Even traitors, mercenaries who had once worked with alien collaborators, begged for a place on the next launch. Because they all saw it now, the cage Earth had been kept in wasn't made of steel or star lines. It was made of fear, and it was broken. Cole's next move was ambitious, borderline insane, a direct strike on a known alien relay station outside the Proxima Centauri system used by the observers to coordinate other planetary surveillance hubs. It was the nexus of the net that kept humanity isolated. Taking it wouldn't just blind their enemies, it would give Cole's people access to faster-than-light paths, communication codes, and map data on other test species the galaxy tried to forget. But Earth had no official warp drives, no tested FTL. They had something else. Project Fangsaw, a prototype, half alien, half human, engineered from the remains of a captured transport vessel and an old asteroid tug. Most scientists said it wouldn't work. Others said it might rip the crew apart on jump entry. Cole listened, nodded, and then ordered launch preparations. "Fear is what they gave us," he told the engineers. "We'll send it back wrapped in iron." He called the ship Mercy's End. They launched under cover of a pulse storm, natural chaos, impossible to track. As they broke the upper atmosphere, alien scanners scrambled, confused by the artificial noise seeded into Earth's remaining satellites. By the time the observers even noticed a breach, the ship was already gone. And then, for the first time in history, humanity jumped. Across space, across silence, through a tunnel not meant for them. And they survived. Barely. 3 crew members died from internal ruptures. The navbot fried. The hull cracked in 3 places. But the ship held together, and through the shattered cockpit glass, they saw it. The relay, a vast black spire orbiting a dead planet, pulsing with information, surrounded by a skeleton fleet of observation craft. No defenses, no weapons. Because the aliens didn't believe anything primitive could ever make the jump. That was their final mistake. Cole had packed the cargo bay with a weapon the aliens had never seen, an emotion-powered EMP. Built from human synapse blueprints, it harnessed raw pain and rage, turned memory into energy, and sorrow into a fuel source. When it ignited, it didn't just shut down tech. It broke minds. Every drone, every observer mind link. Shattered. They didn't know how to defend against grief. They didn't know how to shield from betrayal. They didn't understand the power of guilt, regret, and revenge channeled into pulse form. The relay went dark in 7 seconds, and in the silence that followed, humanity listened. Hundreds of alien broadcasts began bleeding through the static. Conversations, warnings, systems panicking. One line repeated again and again across dozens of languages. The species from Terra has breached containment. But something else emerged, something deeper. A coded fragment, hidden beneath security layers only the observers were meant to access. It referenced coordinates, not to Earth, but to a vault. A hidden one, buried on a forgotten moon in a dead sector, labeled in ancient glyphs. Origin Project, Alpha Strain, File Lock, Human. Cole saw it as soon as they decrypted it. His blood ran cold. Humanity wasn't just a test. It was a weapon, a controlled detonation of sentient biology. And something inside that vault held the truth about why the galaxy feared them so damn much. Cole didn't hesitate. "Plot the course," he said. "We're opening the vault." The vault was older than language. It sat buried beneath the crust of a nameless moon orbiting a dead star, far beyond any charted system, sealed in layers of alloy so dense that even starfire couldn't penetrate. No lights, no defenses, just a beacon pulsing once every 13 hours, broadcasting on a frequency no known species used anymore. Cole stood in the drop chamber of Mercy's End, his hands clenched, jaw locked, eyes scanning the surface as they descended. The moon's landscape was jagged and dark, a cracked shell of a world that had been chewed by gravity and left for dead. It reminded him of Earth after the fall, silent, forgotten, furious. The crew landed without resistance, no fleets, no drones, just windless stillness. "Why guard a vault without guards?" One of the engineers muttered, her voice tight with unease. "Because whatever's inside doesn't need protection." Cole answered, "It needs containment." The entrance was deep beneath the surface, marked by a single, smooth spire rising from the rock, covered in glyphs older than any alien tongue they'd cracked. The team cut through layers of defense seals, each one reacting strangely to human proximity. Not locking out. Opening. That was the first red flag. It wanted them to come in. The first chamber was a maze of lights and whispering walls, technology so advanced it resembled nothing. It hummed with memory. Not electricity. Not plasma. Just thought, like the place itself was aware. And then they found the core. A room with no floor. Just a wide, endless pit. And in the center, a suspended figure. Humanoid, naked, ageless, skin like molten bronze, shifting with faint pulses of heat and static. Its face was human, its eyes were closed, and yet Cole knew, deep down in the parts of himself war hadn't numbed, that this thing wasn't dead. It was waiting. The vault's interface came alive. No buttons, no screens, just contact. Cole touched the edge of the pit, and everything changed. He was no longer in the chamber. He was falling through memories not his own, a spiral of voices, images, wars fought in alien skies, species burned to dust, experiments long buried. He saw galaxies rising and collapsing in seconds, civilizations reduced to code. And then, Earth primitive, violent, chosen. You are the outcome of fear. A voice said, low, hollow, not human. We made you as punishment. The original creators, the ones who built the observers, the watchers, the Mayari, they had seeded the galaxy with life for millennia. Perfect species, peaceful, cooperative, controlled. But one species rebelled, an empire of mind-breakers. They called themselves the Root, a sentient infection. A race so cunning, they corrupted the very concept of peace. It took 1,000 years and 10 burned systems to stop them. And in their panic, the creators made a final weapon. Humanity. Emotion forged into biology. Instinct honed to override logic. Adaptability turned savage. Pain turned sacred. A species built not to rule, not to cooperate, but to conquer through trauma. But something went wrong. Humans didn't just defeat their enemies. They kept evolving. Too fast, too hard, too wild. They were never activated. Until now. The vault was their trigger. Cole staggered back, gasping, blood dripping from his nose. The chamber lights shifted. And the figure in the core. Its eyes opened. They were black, bottomless, human. And it smiled. Finally, it whispered. A commander who understands. Cole raised his weapon instinctively. What are you? It didn't move. I am the first. The first prototype. The original strain. A hybrid. Left here because even the creators feared what it might become if it reached maturity. But now that the relay was gone, now that Earth had awakened. Do you know what you are, Cole Rayner? The figure asked. Cole didn't answer. It leaned closer, floating above the pit like a god without a church. You are not the next stage of evolution. You are the final one. The chamber began to quake, systems unlocking, engines deep below the surface stirring for the first time in eons. And the vault? It was a ship, a planet killer, designed to carry humanity's rage to the stars when the time came. And the time had come. They called it a vault, but it was a war engine, and it hadn't woken up in 10,000 years. Now it moved. The moon groaned like a dying god as the vault ship tore itself free from the crust. What once looked like dormant stone shattered, revealing impossible architecture beneath. Sleek obsidian wings stretching miles wide, thrusters that pulsed with blood-red light, and a hull engraved with symbols no species had translated, because they weren't meant to be read. They were warnings. Cole stood at the command deck, windless air thick around him as the structure shifted around his crew. Walls bent and realigned, accepting them, adjusting for human physiology. Screens formed from thin air. The ship wasn't being piloted. It was bonding, sinking to Cole's DNA, to his thoughts, his memories, his instincts. And deep in the core chamber, the prototype, the first, watched him like a proud father, or a predator grooming its successor. This ship is a grave, one of the crew whispered, half in awe, half in terror. And we're the bones. No, Cole said, his voice a steel whisper. This is judgment. They named the ship Cradlebreaker. Because it wasn't built to conquer planets, it was built to erase the civilizations that thought they'd outgrown war. And now it had a purpose again. The first target wasn't a military base, it was a council world. The Mayari Prime Core, seat of galactic law, a place of sterile peace and hierarchy, where species sat in glass towers and signed orders to sterilize volatile species from safe distances. They never expected Earth to get this far. They certainly didn't expect Earth to fire first. Cradlebreaker jumped in system without warning. Its arrival short-circuited every sensor grid, every comm station, every relay. It didn't decloak or broadcast a demand. It simply opened its forward array. And it screamed. A pulse, sonic and psychic, ripped through space like a wail of vengeance. Entire defense stations froze, pilots hemorrhaged in their cockpits, AI networks collapsed into loops of trauma code, screaming old Earth war footage on repeat. Some ships self-destructed just to escape the noise. Then came the weapon. It wasn't a beam, not a missile. It was a thought, amplified and weaponized. A memory Cole had locked deep in his mind. The day he found his brother's body in the ruins of Havana, throat slit by raiders, face barely recognizable. Cradlebreaker turned that pain into raw energy. It unwrote the surface of the Council world in seconds. Not burned, not exploded. Erased. Like it had never existed. Galactic networks erupted. Some called it a terrorist attack. Others whispered it was a long-dormant threat, finally awakened. But the one message that reached every corner of space was broadcast directly from Cradlebreaker's core, spoken in a voice that was Cole's, but deeper, layered with something more ancient. We remember what you tried to bury. We remember who we were made to be. You taught us fear, now taste what you created. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a verdict. Back on Earth, resistance cells celebrated, not with parades, with preparation. Because now they weren't hiding anymore. They were a species ascending. But not everyone was ready to follow. Some of Cole's closest allies began to break. A few couldn't stomach what he'd done. Others feared what came next. You're becoming what they feared. One soldier told him in private. Something worse than the observers. You're not saving us, you're unleashing us. Cole didn't deny it. He just looked out at the stars and said, They gave us fire and told us never to burn the house down. But this house was never ours. The galaxy scrambled, alliances fractured, species who once obeyed the observers began to whisper about rebellion. But others gathered, older powers, hidden ones. And in the void, something stirred. Not alien, not observer, but something even the creators had buried and sworn never to wake. Because Earth wasn't the only forge. And Cole's awakening may have set off a chain far bigger than he could control. But he didn't stop. He only whispered 2 words into the dark as Cradlebreaker charged its next jump. We begin. They waited for him at the edge of the void. Not observers, not Mayari. Something older. Something the galaxy itself had forgotten. The final coordinates Cole recovered from the broken relay didn't lead to a world or a station. They led to a black scar in space, a rift where physics curled in on itself and time whispered in reverse. No stars shone here, no ships dared patrol it. They called it the Chasm, a dead zone wrapped in legends, warnings, and lost expeditions. Cole didn't hesitate. He ordered Cradlebreaker straight through it. The ship didn't groan. It didn't resist. It was made for this, made to cross boundaries others were too afraid to name. And beyond that rift, they found it. A construct the size of a planet, orbiting nothing. Not made of metal or stone, but bone. A living monument. Pulsing. Breathing. Inside it, a throne room. And seated at the center, a being that didn't blink. Didn't move. Didn't breathe in the way anything living should. It looked human. Almost like a sculptor had tried to remember the shape of man after watching too many gods. Its mouth was stitched shut. Its eyes were endless. And when it stood, every system in Cradlebreaker crashed. It didn't speak with words. It imposed them. Straight into Cole's skull. You have come to finish the pattern. Cole stepped forward alone. The others stayed behind, weapons drawn but trembling. What pattern? He asked, voice raw. The loop. Images flooded his mind. Thousands of worlds, civilizations built from pain, burned into brilliance, then erased. Each one created like Earth, designed for chaos, for war, for evolution. Each one reaching a final moment, ascension or extinction. And every single one before Earth had failed. Except Earth didn't just survive, it thrived in hell. That's what scared the galaxy. Not war, purpose. Humans didn't just kill to survive, they learned to reshape the battlefield itself. What are you? Cole asked. The being moved closer, voice now quieter. I am the first commander. The prototype of what Cole had become. The original weapon that had disobeyed the creators. Chosen thought over control, pain over peace. He'd refused the creators' orders, and so they locked him in this tomb, to die, alone, forgotten. "You passed the final test," the commander said. "You reached me. That means Earth is ready." Ready for what? To be unleashed. The throne pulsed once, and suddenly Cole saw everything. Earth wasn't alone. There were other vaults, hidden across systems, waiting for one species to rise and unlock them. Each one holding weapons, secrets, and blueprints far beyond anything the observers controlled. They weren't watching Earth to protect the galaxy. They were watching to stall the countdown, because once a single vault was opened, they all activated. And now, humanity had the key. "You can remake the galaxy," the first commander said, "or burn it to salt and start again. The others will come for you. They will lie, plead, bargain." Cole clenched his fists. "Let them come." A burst of light flashed behind him. His second-in-command, Mira, stood at the edge of the chamber, blood dripping from her arm. "Cole," she warned, "they're here." A fleet, hundreds of ships, Observer, Mayari, and half a dozen other species who had once sat silent while Earth burned. They were done watching. They came to erase humanity before the fire spread. Cole turned, voice steady. "Fire up Cradlebreaker. Prepare the vault grid, all of them. But we'll start a war that never ends." Mira said. He didn't look back. "Good. Then they'll finally know what it feels like." And as Cradlebreaker rose from the bone world, pulling with it the pulse codes of every hidden vault across the stars, the galaxy watched in stunned silence as their oldest nightmare became reality. Humanity wasn't a mistake. It was a weapon they buried too late. And Cole Rayner, he was the trigger. The first volley landed before their fleets even fired. No speeches, no diplomacy, just pure retaliation. And in the black between stars, one final message echoed from every reactivated vault, in a voice that belonged to no one and everyone. Humanity was never meant to survive. It was born to conquer, and now it remembers.